In the 3rd century before the Common Era, in a colonnade in Athens, a lean and severe man is arguing with himself in public, setting out the objection he intends to demolish with such fairness that his students begin to worry he has changed sides. He is Chrysippus of Soli, 3rd head of the Stoa, and the objection before him is this: if all things are woven by fate, then praise and blame, virtue and vice are empty words, for no man can be held to account for what he could not have done otherwise. He pauses, looks down the length of the colonnade, and reaches, we are told, for a cylinder of wood. He sets the cylinder on a sloped stone and gives it the lightest push with 2 fingers. The cylinder rolls. It rolls because he pushed it, yes, but it rolls in the manner that it rolls, smoothly, evenly, along its length, because it is a cylinder and not a cube. Had he pushed a cube with the same 2 fingers, the cube would have tipped once and stopped. The push is the external cause. The shape is the internal cause. And the motion, Chrysippus says to his students, belongs to both, but the character of the motion belongs to the thing itself. This is one of the oldest surviving images in the history of philosophy for a problem we have not stopped arguing about. It comes down to us through Cicero, who preserved it in his treatise on fate, and through Aulus Gellius, who preserved it again in the Attic Nights, quoting Chrysippus at length, because Gellius understood that no paraphrase would do. The image is small. The stakes are not small. What Chrysippus is defending with a piece of wood on a stone is the possibility that a human being can be responsible for his own life inside a universe that is fully determined. Tonight, you will sit with him a while. Let us begin then where he began, with the principle itself. The Stoics taught that the cosmos is a single living body, ordered through and through by a rational principle they called the Logos, and that nothing which happens within this body happens by chance. Every event is the effect of prior causes, and those causes are themselves effects of causes older still, so that the whole unfolds as a single, continuous, unbroken sequence. This sequence they named Hymarmena, fate, and fate for them was not a blind force pressing down from outside. Fate was the pattern of the world's own reason, working through the nature of each thing. Chrysippus put it in a formula that his critics seized upon and that his successors quoted with care. Fate, he said, is a natural ordering of all things, following upon one another from eternity, an unswerving interconnection. The words are severe. They admit no exception, not the falling of a leaf, not the turning of your head as you listen to this sentence, escapes the interconnection. And here, the ancient critics rose to their feet. If this is true, they said, then the argument runs as follows. Whatever will be, will be. If it is fated that you will recover from your illness, you will recover whether you call the physician or not. If it is fated that you will not recover, then calling the physician will not save you. Therefore, calling the physician is pointless. Therefore, all deliberation is pointless. Therefore, praise, blame, law, punishment, and moral effort are empty conventions, since no man does anything he could have failed to do, and no man fails to do anything he could have done. This objection the ancients called the lazy argument, the argos logos, and it was aimed like a spear at the heart of the Stoic school. Chrysippus did not flinch from it. He accepted the premise. He accepted, that is, that all things follow from prior causes without exception. What he denied was the conclusion, and the way in which he denied it is what has kept his name alive for 23 centuries. He drew a distinction. Not all causes, he said, are of the same kind. There are causes which initiate a motion from outside, and there are causes which belong to the nature of the thing that is moved. The push and the cylinder. The external cause sets the process going. The internal cause determines what shape the process takes, and when we ask who is responsible for the motion, we do not point only to the push. We point to the cylinder, because it is the cylinder's own nature that made the motion the kind of motion it was. Apply this now to a human life. The impression arrives from outside. A man insults you in the street. The event is not in your power. It has come to you from the great chain of causes that stretches back before your birth. But what happens next? Whether you flare into anger, whether you assent to the impression that you have been wronged, whether you carry the offense home with you and lay it beside your sleeping wife, this belongs to the shape of your soul. This is the cylinder, and the shape of your soul, Chrysippus insists, is you. This is the principle. Assent is up to us, not because we stand outside the causal order, sovereign and unmoved, but because our own character is one of the causes within the order, and the causes that pass through us take on the form that we ourselves have given them by the long labor of becoming who we are. Hold this, we will return to it. Now consider the man who advanced this doctrine, and the world in which he advanced it. Chrysippus was born around the year 280, before the Common Era, in the town of Soli, on the coast of Cilicia, in what is today southern Turkey. His origins were provincial. His family was not distinguished. In his youth, we are told by Diogenes Laertius, he was a long-distance runner, which is worth pausing over, because it means that the man who would later write 705 books, if the ancient catalogues are to be believed, first knew his body as an instrument of patience and rhythm, of one foot placed after another over great distances, of the mind holding steady while the lungs burned. He came to Athens as a young man and studied first, it seems, with Cleanthes, the second head of the Stoa, a man of famous poverty and famous perseverance, who had drawn water at night to pay for his lessons with Zeno by day. Cleanthes was patient. Cleanthes was not quick. And Chrysippus, quick and sharp and combative by temperament, is said to have grown restless under his master and to have said, on occasion, that he needed only the doctrines and could work out the demonstrations for himself. This impatience was not perhaps a virtue, but it was a sign. The younger man had found his instrument, and his instrument was logic. Athens, in the middle of the 3rd century before the Common Era, was no longer the Athens of Pericles or of Plato. The city had passed through the wars of Alexander's successors. It was politically diminished, economically strained, and philosophically crowded. In the same generation, or near enough to it, the Academy taught the skepticism of Arcesilaus. The Garden of Epicurus taught the pursuit of tranquil pleasure. The Lyceum continued the Aristotelian tradition. The Cynics walked the streets in their rags, and the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch after which the Stoics were named, held its ground with a doctrine that was by then some 2 generations old and beginning to fray at its logical edges. The Academy in particular pressed hard. Arcesilaus and later Carneades constructed arguments designed to show that Stoic doctrines could not be defended without contradiction. The problem of fate and responsibility was one of these arguments, and it was a good one. It was so good that the Stoic school might not have survived it had Chrysippus not arrived. Cleanthes died around the year 230. Chrysippus succeeded him. He held the school for some 3 decades, and in those decades he wrote so voluminously and argued so tirelessly and defended the Stoic positions with such thoroughness that a proverb arose in the ancient world. If Chrysippus had not been, the Stoa would not have been. It is a strong claim, and the ancients did not make it lightly. What was his life like in those decades? We have few personal details. He was, by all accounts, homely, plain in dress, unmarried, indifferent to the honors of the city. He wrote in a style that was cramped, dense, and, his critics complained, ungraceful. Dionysius of Halicarnassus said his prose was unreadable. Diogenes Laertius reports that he would send a passage to a friend for revision, and when asked why, would reply that he cared for the argument, not for the ornament. He drank wine, we are told, and died, some sources say, from laughing too hard at his own joke about a donkey eating figs. Whether the story is true or not, one senses in it something real. A mind that lived close to the surface of amusement, that saw the absurdity of things, and that was not above laughing at a donkey. But the daily life, so far as we can reconstruct it, was a life of writing and lecturing and arguing. He walked in the Stoa. He set out theses and answered objections. He composed treatises on logic, on physics, on ethics, on the passions, on providence, on fate, on the criterion of truth, on what depends on us. Nearly all of it is lost. What survives is fragments and quotations preserved by others, and above all, the image of the cylinder, which was so vivid that no one who read it forgot it, and no critic who wished to answer him could avoid it. He lived through no war that touched him personally. He suffered no exile. He was not a courtier like Seneca would be, nor an emperor like Marcus, nor a slave like Epictetus. His life, on the outside, is one of the least dramatic in the whole history of philosophy. And this is worth noting because the drama of his thought is entirely internal. He is a man who spent 40 years in a colonnade thinking about how a human being can be free. Now, how did the principle actually function for him? What did it mean, in practice, to hold that assent belongs to us within a fated cosmos? Consider first what he was not saying. He was not saying that we can change the events of the world by wishing them otherwise. The insult in the street will come. The illness will come. The death of the child will come. These are external causes, and they arrive on their own schedule, indifferent to our preferences. The Stoics before him had said this, and he did not depart from it. What he added, or rather, what he clarified with a precision that his predecessors had not achieved, was the account of what happens inside the human being when the external cause arrives. An impression, a fantasia, presents itself to the mind. This is not up to us. If a loud noise sounds, we startle. If a beautiful face appears, we notice it. If we are insulted, the impression of having been wronged rises in us. All of this, Chrysippus says, is the push against the cylinder. It comes from outside. It sets a motion going. But then, and here is the whole doctrine, there is the moment of assent, synkatathesis. The mind, presented with the impression, must give or withhold its agreement. It must say, yes, this is so. I have been wronged, and I shall now be angry. Or it must say, no, this impression is not to be trusted. Or it must say, yes, something has happened, but its meaning is not what it first appears. And in this moment of assent, Chrysippus locates the whole of moral life. Now the critic will say, but the assent too is caused. It follows from prior causes. It could not have been otherwise. And Chrysippus answers, yes, it is caused. But by what? By the character of the soul that gives it. The soul assents in the manner that a cylinder rolls, according to its own shape. And the shape of the soul is not something that happened to it once and for all, at birth. The shape of the soul is what a human life is engaged in forming, day by day, assent by assent, through the exercise of reason and the discipline of the passions. Here, Aulus Gellius preserves, in the Attic Nights, a passage in which Chrysippus himself speaks. The translation is old, and I will render it plainly. Chrysippus says that just as a person who pushed a cylinder gave it the beginning of its motion, but did not give it the capacity to roll, so the objects that impinge upon our minds will impress upon them their forms, but our assent will be in our own power, and, as we said of the cylinder, though pushed from without, will thereafter move by its own force and nature. Read that again in your mind. The impression comes from without. The assent moves by its own force and nature. The force and nature are yours. What follows from this for the conduct of a life? A great deal. It follows first that the training of the soul is the whole task. If assent belongs to the shape of the soul, then the shape of the soul is what one must work upon, and one works upon it, the Stoics taught, by the daily practice of examining one's impressions, of asking whether they are true, of refusing to assent hastily, of refusing to assent to impressions that carry false judgments of value hidden within them. The insult in the street carries with it the impression that a serious harm has occurred. But has a serious harm occurred only if you assent to the judgment that another man's opinion of you is a harm? Withhold that assent, and the insult passes through you without effect. The push has come, but the cylinder has been shaped over years to roll in a different direction. It follows, second, that the Stoic is not passive. This must be said clearly, because the lazy argument was designed precisely to make the Stoic appear passive, and modern readers who encounter the doctrine of fate often assume the same. But Chrysippus's position is the opposite. Because your assents are yours, because your character is the cause that shapes what passes through you. The effort you make to become a certain kind of person is not futile. It is, in fact, the only effort that matters. The physician must still be called. The deliberation must still be undertaken. The action must still be performed. For these two are causes in the chain, and they are the causes that belong to you. There is a phrase the Stoics use for this. They said that some events are co-fated. It is fated that you will recover, yes, but it is fated that you will recover having called the physician. The calling and the recovering are not two independent events, one of which could be dropped without disturbing the other. They are a single, connected sequence. To imagine that you might obtain the outcome without the action is to misunderstand what fate is. Fate is not a set of outcomes handed down from above. Fate is the pattern of causes and effects, and you are inside the pattern, not outside it. And it follows, third, that responsibility is preserved. The man who commits a crime commits it because of the shape of his soul, which produced the assent from which the action flowed. The shape of his soul was itself produced by prior causes. Yes, but the shape is his. The crime belongs to him because it flowed from him, in the manner that only he could have produced it. The punishment that follows is not an injustice, for it too is part of the causal order, and it too works upon the shape of souls, both his and those of others who observe him. This last point troubled some of Chrysippus's readers, and it should trouble you a little as well. It is a hard doctrine. It does not offer the consolation that the criminal could have done otherwise in some absolute sense. It offers only the observation that the crime was his, in the specific and traceable way that a motion belongs to a cylinder. Whether that is enough to ground the moral practices we call justice and blame is a question philosophers still argue. Chrysippus thought it was enough. He thought that the alternative, the idea that human actions arise from nothing, that they interrupt the causal order rather than express it, was incoherent. A soul that acted from nothing would not be acting at all. It would merely be twitching. Now let us come to the structural lesson. What is Chrysippus actually teaching you? He is teaching you that freedom, in the sense that matters for a human life, is not the absence of causation. It is not the capacity to have done otherwise in some magical, uncaused way. It is something else, something more modest and more demanding. Freedom, for Chrysippus, is the condition in which the causes that pass through you take the shape of your own reason. When you are angry because you have been insulted, and your anger has not been examined, and your assent to the impression of harm has been given hastily and without reflection, you are not free. You are being rolled by the push. Your shape, in that moment, is whatever shape the passions and habits and unexamined judgments have given you. The motion is yours in the trivial sense that it happens in your body. It is not yours in the deeper sense of expressing your reason. But when the impression arrives and you pause and you ask, is this truly a harm? Is this impression true? What does my reason say of it? And you give or withhold your assent according to the answer, then the motion is yours in the deeper sense. It expresses the shape you have labored to give your soul. The push is still external. The rolling is still caused, but the character of the rolling is now the character of a mind that has taken responsibility for what passes through it. This is the whole teaching. It does not promise that you will escape the chain of causes. You cannot escape it. It does not promise that events will bend to your will. They will not. It promises only that within the chain, at the point where the chain passes through you, there is work to be done, and the work is yours, and the doing of it is what a human life is for. Notice what this doctrine refuses. It refuses the fantasy of the sovereign self, the self that stands above the world and chooses freely, as if from nowhere. Chrysippus does not believe in such a self, and he thinks that anyone who claims to believe in it has not thought carefully about what belief would mean. A self that chose from nowhere would be a self that chose randomly, which is to say, not a self at all. But the doctrine also refuses the opposite fantasy, the fantasy of the helpless self, the self that is merely tossed about by forces beyond its control and therefore need not trouble itself with the discipline of virtue. Chrysippus does not believe in this self either. He thinks it is a self-flattering illusion, adopted by those who prefer not to do the work. Between these two fantasies, he places the cylinder, a thing that is pushed but that rolls according to its shape, a thing whose motion is caused but whose motion is nonetheless its own. And this, he says, is what a human being is. Not a god above the world, and not a stone beneath the wheel, but a shaped thing in the current of causes, whose shaping is itself a cause, whose shape can be worked upon, and whose life is that work. Consider what this asks of you. It asks that you stop demanding of yourself a kind of freedom you do not have and never had. The freedom to be uncaused, to have arrived at this moment as someone other than the person you are, to have made choices in the past that were not shaped by the person you were then. This freedom is not on offer. It never was. What is on offer is different. It is the freedom to work from this moment forward on the shape of what you are becoming, to notice the impressions as they arrive, to withhold the hasty assent, to let the reason you have, however small, do the work reason can do, and to accept that this, and not the impossible sovereignty you imagined, is what freedom means for a creature like you. The training is slow. Chrysippus did not promise otherwise. He was a long-distance runner in his youth, and one senses that he never quite stopped being one. The shape of a soul is not changed in an afternoon. It is changed by many afternoons, many impressions, many small refusals and small assents over years, in the manner of a body that is trained by running, day after day, until what was once effortful becomes second nature, and what was once the shape of the untrained soul becomes the shape of a soul that has done its work. We have come almost to the end. Let us close where he would have closed, without ceremony. The cylinder is on the stone. Someone will push it. The push is coming, whether from an insult in the street, or from a piece of news that arrives tomorrow, or from a loss you have not yet imagined, but that is already in the great chain of causes, on its way to you. You cannot prevent the push. You were never going to prevent the push. What you can do, what Chrysippus spent 40 years in a colonnade insisting that you can do, is attend to the shape. Not tonight, once and for all, but tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, in small acts of attention and small refusals of hasty assent. The shape you carry into the next impression is the shape you have been giving yourself, whether you notice the giving or not. From now on, you may notice. There is a question the doctrine leaves with you, and I will not answer it for you. It is this: given that the person you are today is the cause of the assents you will give tomorrow, and given that those assents will in turn shape the person you become the day after, what small work of shaping is available to you now, in this hour, before the next push arrives? You do not have to answer quickly. Chrysippus did not answer quickly. He wrote 700 books, we are told, and he laughed at a donkey eating figs, and he ran in his youth long distances at a steady pace. There is time. There is not unlimited time, but there is time, and the cylinder is, after all, yours. Farewell.